Coming to you live from Kudu Studios with Vian Izak, it's Sounds About Music. Sounds about right! How to create a second album featuring Vian Izak and guests.
Hello, everybody. My name is Vian Izak. I am an indie pop artist and producer from Nashville, Tennessee. And this podcast, Sounds About Music, is the journey of how to create an album from the heart of Music City. In this podcast, I talk about music production, I talk about songwriting, and I invite all the people who helped me make this album to come on the show. And I actually have someone who has been with me longer than anyone else in this industry and in any other industry. And his name is Hein, and he's my brother. So, Hein, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. So I just had to have you on because, I mean, we've done so much together, and so much of the Vian Izak project is you.
Oh, thanks.
And, you know, everything visual that everyone has ever seen has had your hand on it. So I wanted to just invite you along and kind of talk to you and just honor you with everything you do. So I think we can just kind of jump into, I actually had a lot of my fans on Discord ask some questions about you.
Oh, cool.
And so I have some of those questions. I should actually pull those up.
That would be awesome. I just want to say thanks for having me on the show. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, man, no problem. So I think we can just dive into one of the first things, and honestly, I don't even really know this about you. So, and you're my brother, so I'm sort of curious. But I'd really love to know what your earliest memory is of you drawing and world building, and kind of where that started, kind of where it evolved from there.
Yeah, I think they started at sort of different times. I think, well, actually, they might have started at the same time. The world building, I remember really specifically being on a road trip once through the Nevada area when we were young. I don't know where we were going.
Could it have been a church trip, maybe a road trip to California?
It could have been a church
or on
trip.
tour with Orange Free State?
It might have been that. No, it was earlier. I was very young. Maybe we weren't in California. Maybe we were just somewhere in Colorado. Oh, I just remember starting to build this world in my head of these people who live on this mountain, and then there's this cloud layer that they can't go under because there's like robots down there that would kill them. And then it was really about like, it was, I think during that time I had just seen like Pirates of the Caribbean, and I just really liked the fish people and the look of them. So I really wanted the robots to look like that. And then like, and I like the idea of like a city like that was like the last bastion, like up on the mountains. So I just kind of started building that as a world, and it never really turned into anything, but I just liked doing that. And then after that, it kind of like spiraled into more worlds and things that I started drawing, you know, as well. So, and then I remember clearly drawing figures when I was young. I don't know when exactly, maybe middle school. But I just made them out of boxes because I didn't know like much about the human form and anatomy or anything.
What do you mean boxes? That's very interesting.
I just like actually made them out of just rectangles.
Wow.
Like and just because I didn't know what I was doing, but it was the first time it felt like it worked. I was like making things out of rectangles, and I was like, oh, this actually somewhat looks like a human figure, you know, almost like maybe puppet looking, maybe not. And later on in art school, you find out that that's really a good thing to do, is to be making stuff out of. But in art school, you find out that you should be making things out of like, or picturing like 3D boxes around things. It helps you kind of put things into space. But these were like just 2D shapes, you know.
That's crazy though, that just intuitively though you were pretty close to what they teach in art school.
Yeah, but I think that is pretty crazy. But I think it was more than anything. It was, a box gave me proportion, and it has a length and a width, you know. So and I think what I was missing was a z-axis height as well, you know, to add to make it into 3D, you know.
That's crazy though, because that does mean you were using the same technique. You just weren't doing it in 3D. You were doing it in 2D.
In 2D.
Wow.
So it was cool. That was and I think I remember that because that was the first time like I'd been complimented on art. I think I was drawing stuff before then, but that was the first time Dad actually was like, oh wow, like this has potential, you know? Like, and then I was like, oh okay, cool, like maybe this is something I should do, you know.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
Cool. So you started drawing, and you started drawing in rectangles, and then
Yeah.
I kind of remember from you growing up, we were both always kind of drawing very early on, you know,
Yeah,
because I
we
remember
were.
I would do the whole Chiplender thing.
Yeah,
Remember
they were
that?
so cool. And I think here's the other thing. I think we were world building probably before I world built my own things.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Because when we played games together, we were world building. Like,
Yeah, I'll never forget old video that Dad filmed of us. I mean, I was probably 4 and you were 3, or 5 and 4, and we were in the Namib Desert in Namibia. Do you remember? Do you remember this video? And there was this rock where we were playing on this rock next to where we were camping for the night, and it was a spaceship to us.
Oh yeah,
And it was fascinating to watch us, like, we were literally completely in our own worlds.
Yeah.
Like it, and it was all so real to us.
I think that's the thing. I think world building is something that I think just children just do because they inhabit like an imaginary world. So I don't think it's a unique thing. I think it's a unique thing to continue doing.
Yeah.
Or just maybe not super unique. There's a whole community of world builders out there, but it's a thing that people a lot of times grow out of.
I would
know?
say it is more rare. I mean, you're right. There is a community, but let's be real with it. Compared to the general population,
Yeah. No,
how many
absolutely.
people do you know that do?
Yeah,
world building?
yeah. That's true actually.
Yeah.
So what you find is it's very addicting and fun. World building is because I think it puts
What do you
people.
mean? What do you mean by that? Addicting?
Well, I think it puts people in that same mode that they're in as kids of like pure imagining. You know, like it just like purely imagining things without much. There doesn't need to be as much. There needs to be purpose behind them, and like really well built worlds have purpose behind everything. But in terms of comparing world building to storytelling, world building is so fun because it's so non-linear. So you don't have to try and tie up loose ends or think about a story or so on. You can really jump around and do anything you want, and it feels a lot like playing as a kid. So, and you're right, it is more rare for grown-ups to do world building, but I think there's a huge resurgence of that now with a lot of tabletop games that people are playing, with a lot of just video games, of people being invested in the lore of video games. So people make lore videos, and then I don't know. There's other people who just start building these worlds for fun, right?
Yeah.
And I do think it's a very fun, addicting thing to do. You know, and
That's-
you hear that from game studios too. They always talk about how world building you can just keep going and going and going.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
So,
Man, so you bring up like lore and people make lore videos and that kind of thing. So one of the main things that was discussed on my Discord this week was people are curious about both the Vian Izak lore and the Juniper Vale lore. I think a lot of people don't know about that. Now, what I would say first is when it comes to Juniper Vale, there's a whole audiobook series that dives into the lore a little bit. I don't know if people actually know about that, but it's on Spotify. But I would love, if you don't mind, maybe starting with Vian Izak and talking a little bit about your concept behind that first comic we did. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how we started the project, you know, with that first rhino illustration that you did.
Yeah.
And I would say Vian Izak, interestingly enough, now that you talk about all this, really was a world building exercise rather than a plot or narrative exercise.
Yeah.
Because it evolved out of this fascinating world you built with African animals in the Arctic.
Yeah, totally. I can do that. I can tell you about those. Yeah, I think it kind of evolved out of world building, and the narrative of the comic book eventually just kind of felt like a necessity for tying a lot of like worlds together. It was kind of like a unifying concept for world building in general. Like,
Wow.
so it was yeah, because it was just our version of like a multiverse, but it had its own sort of specific, interesting, for me at least, interesting way that it did it. You know?
Oh, I think it's fascinating the way that you explained it. When you first came up with it, I was like, dang, that's super cool.
Thank you. It was very, very fun to do. It was
Yeah.
very, very fun to do. So the world we built really started off as just like rhinos in the Arctic. It was interesting because it wasn't like a world concept that came as like a concept, you know, like some of the other worlds that I'm working on in our building did. It came more in the form of imagery, which happens a lot of times too, and with your influence as well. Because I remember you contacted me and you were like, "Yeah, man, like I want it to be like just super cool and epic." Like, and I was like, "Okay, cool and
That's
epic."
what
like,
I would always call you, and I'd be like, dude, like imagine like big landscapes and like interesting animals and stuff in the landscapes.
I just wanted to be like in the Arctic and just like everything's huge and
that's like classic when the client has no idea what the industry is about. You know, when someone in my industry is like, yeah, you know, like I want to sound like, I don't know, Coldplay. Everyone wants to sound like Coldplay.
So and the rhinos, totally. So the rhinos, the first image I drew was this of you on a rhino, like in the snowy field and everything. And something about it just kind of worked. It felt right. It was just, it fit the music, and it was really, it captured like a cold theme we had going on, and then also like spoke to our past, being from South Africa and everything. So it worked in that sense. On sort of a visual level, it kind of invoked that sense. But then also we needed to tie it up into a world, and that was really what I wanted to do. And that's really what I do with most things I work with any client on. Is we'll a lot of times come up with an idea, and then I'll draw a few things, and then it'll snowball into a whole world, because I'll kind of see a pattern that we can tie everything together with, and sort of a system that we can fall everything into. So the system for Vian Izak ended up coming out as the concept of two-dimensional time.
That's awesome.
Which was cool, because it's just like, okay, it's a different timeline that they're in, but where it differs from Marvel timelines and multiverses and things is I never really understood how we can move fluidly through space, and there's no way for us currently to just jump from one part of space to another instantly. Like there's no way to do that. So if you're inventing a time machine or something that manipulates time, it's actually kind of odd for it to be able to jump to a different timeline, you know, and just to jump back and forth and all this stuff. Because if you're manipulating time like you would space, then you'd have to kind of flow back and forth and move through iterations of things.
Yeah,
happening.
like a car. A car moves from point A to point B.
Exactly, and you can go
teleport.
fast. Exactly. It doesn't just teleport. Yeah, thank you. Teleport. It's the word I was looking for. So,
wow, that's crazy, man. So a time machine, that's so true. You would think it would be the same. So the idea of a time machine disappearing in one time and appearing in another is like a teleporting car.
Exactly. And so that's why usually time machines are, in sci-fi, they're said to have control over space and time. And so much control, that's why they can like teleport, because they have control over space and time. But my thought is if you just have something that's manipulating time around itself, it would probably start as not being able to just teleport like that and be like a car, or even slower, you know, at first. And then we could start speeding it up to get to different timelines. So then from that, and the whole point of this was to kind of wrap into why are there, you know, African animals in the Arctic, you know? So
wow, it's because we were slowly driving from one timeline to another. And things were slowly transitioning.
They were slowly changing, and it only felt weird to us, and we didn't notice it as much in the comic. This is, we as in our characters in the comic didn't notice it as much because we were in the Arctic, which is a like kind of barren place, you know. So the concept of two-dimensional time, after coming up with some of these things, more images came my way, and they really had to do with motion. So it was really about like, if somebody's standing in a field, the environment around them would start changing as they went through, you know, sideways or so on in time, and not just like, things wouldn't just speed up and slow down or go backwards. They'd pause and then morph as they like transition into different versions of themselves. So that fluidity is what I really liked and really was after. So
the funny thing is, we are 3 years into the Vian Izak project, and I've never heard you explain it like that. Kind of the problem you were trying to solve, the conceptual problem, and that's fascinating. That's actually really, really cool, because now that I think about it, it is kind of weird that time machines in all sci-fi jump from one timeline to another, but no other plane, like, you know, the spatial plane doesn't work like that. So it's kind of interesting that we think that with time you can all of a sudden just jump from, you know, 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So,
But you can't, you know,
Yeah.
and it's mostly about that secondary time access of like, different timelines, because time machines will in sci-fi like
Go
speed
forward
time
and
up
back, yeah,
or
yeah.
back or go back, though they all oftentimes just jump back as well or jump forward. But it was about that, like, okay, why do we think that we can jump to a timeline where things are so different, right? And a lot of the reasoning behind that is because, you need to be able to find where it's split off and branched from our timeline. So you have these time streams. But I explained this in the comic, and it was kind of fun how you should still be able to make a plane out of those.
because there's so many choices and so many different variations
right.
that eventually all those lines that are parallel with each other begin to make one solid surface.
Sure, yeah. Or they could, like, in appearance, maybe. That was
Yeah,
one
I mean,
way
this
of
is all armchair thinking.
yeah, and that was maybe just one way of looking at it. But it was really just fun, and it was fun to be able to make a system where you can track kind of like what is changing and how you're going sliding through time. You know,
That's amazing, man.
So that was the idea. So the comic book delves into that.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. We haven't really been discussing a lot of what's coming up with Vian Izak because I think this time we're really focusing on the music first and then jumping into the world and the art after that, kind of based on where the music's at, because I feel like that is something we both agreed last time we can do better and tighter.
Yes.
Is the art was sort of its own thing, the music was sort of its own thing, and then there was definitely some crossovers, some touch points. A lot of the album covers appeared in the comic, for example, so there was definitely some things where you could tell, well, this is the same thing. But this time we really want it to be much tighter.
Yeah.
And really the art and the music can't live without each other. So we haven't really talked a lot about that, but I don't know if you've had any thoughts or ideas. We were maybe talking right before the podcast starts about maybe some stylistic changes that might come with Vian Izak. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that things just getting a little bit more gritty, I think, and
I agree.
and emotional.
Because I'm so angsty.
Yeah.
All the songs are so angsty.
They're so angsty, and I think my style for a long time has kind of tended towards the cutesy and the Pixar, which I mean, I'm not against that, and I think that's a great place to live in if it fits what you're doing.
Yeah.
So as I'm finding your music and your newer stuff as well, it's a lot more angsty.
I'm growing, all right? I'm evolving as an artist.
and I think
The more I live life, the more I just realize there's a lot more to be angsty about.
and I think
Just kidding.
as you evolve, I am kind of evolving off of that as
Yeah.
well. And I think we're evolving together, like you just said. I think both of us were very proud of what we had made, but we're unhappy with especially that aspect
Yeah.
and tying them together more. So stylistically, making things a little bit more maybe darker, but if anything, more emotional and more just more emotional.
Maybe an emotional arc with the music, with the art that matches the emotional arc of the music.
No, absolutely.
So that's
absolutely.
and that's a much more challenging thing than I realized.
Yeah,
it
and-
is. It's hard enough just with an album.
Yeah.
To make there be an emotional arc with just the music. Now adding this next layer of making the art and the story also have an emotional arc, it just adds a whole nother level of complexity. So it's a fun but long puzzle to solve, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I just want to get you out of that damn snowsuit. Because it's like, why are we still wearing snowsuits? We're like,
The funny thing is I've never worn a snowsuit.
yeah, it just fit because we were started in the Arctic, so
Yeah. You know what? I agree.
yeah. So there's some character changes coming. While sticking to kind of the silhouettes of the characters, I wanna just make them a little bit more real, you know.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, no, that's great. I think. I mean, we can jump into two things. I don't know. Maybe I'll invite Sarah from Through Juniper Vale onto a podcast so she can talk about the lore and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that might be better.
And we worked on the lore together and so on, but it was very collaborative. So
Okay,
and I
okay.
think that I didn't take as much of a lead there. So yeah.
Okay, then
Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you are a force of nature when it comes to world building. So I think you really always add when
Sure,
you're
sure,
around.
sure.
But so listeners, just letting you know, I think we're going to save that one for another podcast. As much as I think that lore is super interesting, and Juniper Vale's lore I think is super developed and quite fascinating. If you are interested, go listen to Sarah's audiobooks on Spotify. She's got a playlist, and she actually released music with each chapter of her podcast of her story. So that could be something cool to check out. But I think, if you don't mind, Hein, you are an illustrator. You have a degree in animation, so you can do animation. And then you're a songwriter as well.
Yeah.
And my best performing top song is one that you wrote. So you are just a multi-talented guy.
Oh,
and
thanks, man.
it's just amazing.
Oh, so are you, man.
Oh, thanks. No, I mean, so Revolver, the first track we released that has over 1 million, like 1.5 million streams, and London Air Raids, which is now my top performing song. We're almost at 600,000 streams. Do you ever think about that? Do you ever think about that the two songs you wrote have been listened to by human beings 2 million times?
No, I rarely do. I rarely think about that. Sometimes it hits me, or when you mention it, it does. But yeah, mostly I just, it's weird because I've always been so primarily visual first, and then but then I don't know.
So it never crosses your mind?
No, it really doesn't. It's sometimes, okay, yeah, that's a lie. It does cross my mind, but not often at all. And when it does, I'm very pleased with it. But one, I really know that it's mostly, or a lot of it, is due to your effort and the marketing and the actual running of the label that you do, and running of the project, and your production on everything. So I know that.
Yeah, but Hein, all that stuff is true, but I got to be real with you. You got to start with something great first. And the songs you've always delivered are always, I always can't believe that you wrote them. I'm just like, dang,
that's so
that's amazing.
nice. Yeah, all I can say is then let's just write more together. It's interesting. I don't think about them because I challenge myself so much visually, and I'm so hard on myself visually, and like even just discussing like, okay, the changes we wish we had been making, and the stuff we've learned, and matching the music to the art more, and so on and so forth. Those are things that really take up most of my thoughts. Most of the time it's, okay, how could I have done this better, and how can we improve on this, and thoughts about how can we present the worlds better, so that it doesn't need like a verbal explanation of two-dimensional time, where it's really something that
is self-evident.
And visually self-evident, and that's tough to do because it takes a lot of time to do that, to do it right,
to do it in a way that it isn't cliche.
Yeah,
because remember last summer when I was like, dude, for the next one, let's just do Vian Izak mechs. And it's just Vian Izak with giant robots, and that's the concept.
Yeah.
And you were like, okay.
No, I was excited. That was still a good idea. There's cool art that came out of that. I think that there's cool art that we might still use, I don't think that was a bad idea at all. But I think that, like explaining two-dimensional time or explaining a world, is tough because you want to rope it into a story as well. So because people really like stories and they like to hear stories, and I do too. But I also really just like encyclopedias of lore and things like that.
Yeah.
So I'm still learning how to really present worlds that I've built, and I think that's probably the lifelong thing. And so just to tie it back, that's why I think I don't think about the music side as much. But when I do, I'm very excited and grateful for that happening, and having the opportunities to do that, which is with you. So I just thank you for that.
Hey, no problem, man. I mean, it's so fun to do. Actually, earlier this week, we had a impromptu session one night when you came by. You were just going to come by to, I don't know, chat for just a minute. And we sat down and started playing some stuff. And I think it's because we're brothers and, we've been together our whole lives. So we're able to be honest with each other, and there's just always been a chemistry when we sit down and do music together. So the thing that we made is definitely going to be on the album, and it's gorgeous. I'm so excited to produce it out. So I think what we'll do is after a little bit, we're going to play that demo, or actually we're going to play parts of the actual session where we were writing, because I luckily pressed record right when I realized we were starting to write something. So you'll get to listen to something as we're writing it and as we're developing it. But that'll be after the break. So right now, before we go, this is the end of the first half of the podcast, Hein. So usually what I do is I have something called the Album Number 2 Club.
Oh, Vian, I know about the album.
Oh, I know you know. So if you want to listen to the full episodes of each podcast, typically what I do is the first half of each podcast, I introduce a bunch of ideas. And then the second half, what I do is I share demos and recordings of what I've worked on that week. So if you want to be a part of that, then go to vianizak.com/soundsaboutmusic and sign up to become a part of my Album Number 2 Club. What you get for that is you get the full episode of each podcast. You get to join the Discord chat, which is a chat server where I interact with fans every week, and I respond to questions they have. We talk about gaming, we talk about all kinds of things, and I share little demos on there as well. And you get photos and audio clips of what I'm working on in the session. So I would highly encourage anyone who's interested in this, who's interested in music and art in general, to go sign up, check it out, and you'll be able to listen to the next half of this podcast. But before we go into that, Hein, I really would love for you to share something super exciting that you're working on right now, and that I cannot wait for it to be released.
I'm super excited. I am in the middle of a Kickstarter to fund a children's book that I'm writing. And the best part about this children's book is that it comes with a world book as well. And it kind of goes along with what we were just talking about, which is that I'm working on how to kind of tie together explanations of the world as well as story in the same piece of content. So this is another attempt at that to see how
that's amazing.
It's working. Wow. So essentially the world is a world of critters who ride giant bugs. So the children's book is called The Life of Ollie, and it's about a raccoon and his life, his extremely long life and his walk through history. Essentially, he claims to be like eons and eons of years old.
So he starts telling the story to these kids, right?
So he starts telling the story of his life to these kids, and they don't believe that he's as old as he says he is. Mm-hmm. And so what he does is he shows them all of the memorabilia that he's collected throughout the years of his life. There's sort of a scavenger hunt element because you can find all of the oddities he's collected throughout the really detailed illustrations in the book. Wow. You can go back and look through them, and it's just the imagery is super fun, and the bugs are super cute, and so are the critters. But then there's also this like kind of epicness to everything because everything's blown up and massive, and there's just massive temples and cities and everything. So
yeah, and what I love is, like you say, it's a book that spans the eons. Mm-hmm. So each page is just the next era in this world, and it's really gorgeous art. And I think what I love about it is I think it's great for kids, but I also think there's a huge element that people of any age will really enjoy.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that like I made it also for people who love art really, and to love really detailed art, and to look through art and kind of gaze into and find new things in the art every time they look. So, and what's awesome is it's paired with this world book, the Book of Adventurers, and that has kind of an encyclopedia of the adventurers in this world and their bug companions. So each one of them has a name and a story and a little map that shows you what part of the world they've explored, and they exist in these same eras that the book goes through. And they each, I just love that they each have like a bug pet, like bug companion pet that like also has a little name, and like everybody, it's just super
it's
cute.
The stuff of little kids' dreams.
Yeah,
Imagine if
so
we,
much fun.
As 6 and 7 year olds, saw this book, we would totally freak.
And as of now, we're a little over, I think we're almost 80% funded. I don't know.
Yeah,
Close to.
super
Yeah.
close. What's amazing too is Kickstarter featured it.
Yeah, so it's been for the past, I think for the whole run of its thing, it's been within the top 2 pages of the popular publishing
Wow.
project. So that's been really, really great because I'm getting support from that, and it keeps growing and growing, and it's sort of snowballing. And
Yeah, so I've already backed it, and what I say is the more we can fund it and the more people everyone can tell to go check it out and fund, the cooler I think Hein is going to be able to make this. So I would really encourage everyone to go check it out and tell all your friends. Now, Hein, where can they go to check this out? Did they just go on Kickstarter?
So you can go to my Instagram, which is just at Hein Zaayman.
HeinZaayman.
And I'm guessing there can be links under the podcast.
Yeah, I'll link it all.
The support has been awesome. I just want to thank everybody who's supported so far. You guys are making this happen, and it's a dream come true for me.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to the first half of this episode. If you want to listen to the full episode, go to vianizik.com/soundsaboutmusic and join my album number 2 club. Thanks so much.